is numb, the curtain's clean, your dog is dead, it's a Ponzi screen. Ponzi screen, Ponzi screen, because it's just something to do.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ponzi Scream. Today we have a special episode. We have host of Pod Damn America and Why You Mad, friend of the show, Jake Flores. We're here to talk.
Hello.
Here to talk about Prop 22 a little bit, and just want to go over what some of the crazy stuff that's been going on in California right now, all related to gig work and tech economy stuff. Jake, thanks for coming on. How's work for you, man?
Good. I am actually currently not working gig work. I stopped right around when COVID started because when coronavirus was breaking out and things were getting really dicey, I kind of did some numbers and realized I could live off of online work, podcasting and stuff. And the money that they sort of threw at us, and I live kind of cheaply and stuff, but I have been a gig worker and will be one again, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, I love that knowledge where you're like, I will be back regardless of what I think about it,
Yeah.
Yeah, now you're just raking in that Soros money.
Oh yeah. He also pays via an app. You do
yeah.
TaskRabbit, but for Antifa stuff.
So, Jake, do you mind saying which folks you worked for when you were gigging?
Yeah, I mean, obviously everything's satire, everything's parody in case of legal whatever. But I worked for Caviar for a long time, which like merged with DoorDash at some point, and then it was both of those or some shit. I don't really know how exactly that worked, but Caviar was the app that I sort of that ended up working out all right for me. I know different people have different experiences. I did a little bit of Uber Eats, but particularly in the time and place where I was, I think Caviar was the best. I was doing delivery shit on a bike.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you like switch back and forth between the two or something like that?
You know what's weird is that you're not supposed to, like, if you get caught with both of the apps on at the same time or doing multiple apps, then you could get banned. But
really?
But also everyone does it, and like when you go, I remember when I went to go do onboarding and had them like explain, the fucking 5 rules they throw at you before they just go out and do it. Basically they sort of wink at you and they go, hey, you don't do this, but if you do it, then I think one of the main things that they would say is cover up the logo on your bag, because that at some point could make them like legally liable for whatever the fuck happens if something happens while you're on a delivery for Uber but you're using a Caviar bag or something. I don't fucking know, but they didn't care. I mean, part of the independent contracty nature of this stuff is like, certain stuff is not their like they don't care. Like it's not on them if like something happens because you're not an employee. So not only are they not responsible for you, I guess they're not like liable for you.
That's something that's kind of debatable, though. I mean, that's kind of one of the big issues is if you're not an employee, can like there's this big legal theory of like if you are an employee and you're doing something while working for them, your employer is liable, and that's like basically a principle for anything. But if you're an independent contractor, there's just like less understanding of liability. But in general, there's this, if you are doing something on behalf of somebody else and getting paid for it, then and there's some sort of accident that's your fault while you're doing it, very likely that like the person who hired you could be responsible. It's just kind of like a general principle. So that's probably why they're doing that. I'm shocked that they tell you that you can't technically be switching back and forth, because that's by design how it's supposed to work for you for gig workers, right?
I think it's de facto how it works, but it's not on paper how it legally functions. I mean, I think legally you can switch back and forth, but you legally probably aren't supposed to have both of the apps that catch jobs on at the same time, because in theory it like gums stuff up, and it's not all working on the same algorithm, so the routes get weird or something. But what's crazy though is that everyone does use all the apps at the same time. I mean, if you've ever been in an Uber, you'll notice they have like a Lyft thing also, and the
Yeah.
other one or whatever.
Mhm.
And because
My
of
favorite is seeing taxi drivers who have Uber as
Yeah.
well.
That's so
Yeah.
bleak.
And they also
Yeah.
have the taxi app and the Lyft app. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's like NASCAR, where they just have everything they're sponsored by, like any access point to the exact same service.
Right.
Yeah. And what's crazy is that because everyone is actually doing all the apps at the same time, like it creates, that's where the level of competition lies. So then it's actually functionally sort of impossible to not do that, because they
Yeah.
then lower the amount of pay they give you, because they figure out how much they can get away with paying you if on average everyone's happy with only making a certain amount of money from their like Lyft shift or fucking Uber or Caviar shift or whatever, because it's stacked on top of three other things, but it's not supposed to be. So it creates this situation where you're forced to work illegally, kind of,
Mm-hmm. And a
Yeah.
huge
Yeah.
labor supply. Like it's like stand-up comedy. Like there's just such a high
Yes.
labor supply that they can pay you nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing that I noticed was I had friends in comedy who, they moved out to the suburbs, and they were like, this was when Uber was first popping off, and so there wasn't a huge pool of Uber drivers yet, and there was almost this false promise that you're going to make a certain amount of money gigging for 5 or 6 hours a day. But then once Uber opens up to everyone, the market gets glutted with part-time workers, and so like the quality of the rides, and also the customer experience, but also the quality of the worker experience, everything just like drops.
Right. And ultimately, the more you have independent contractors, the more that hurts everyone else's just like chances of getting work. Like I would imagine, like I haven't spoken to any formal taxi drivers, but it's pretty clear how much they are suffering. And while they were, I think, technically authorized as independent contractors by the taxi companies, they had certain protections, and a taxi driver at a certain point, it was a very middle class job. You could buy a house in Queens as a taxi driver.
Yeah, one of the weird things about gig working is kind of like what Jake was saying, and what you were saying, David, how they do promise, where it's like, oh yeah, you can make all this money if you do this. But my experience with it was kind of this weird mixed bag, and my current experience with it, which is basically like they're like, hey man, if it's like 2 a.m., you could turn the app on, you could start making money, you could start doing this, and it is very clear by all standards that the only times you really make money are like from like 5-ish, 6-ish p.m. to like 9-ish, 10-ish, and maybe sometimes a little bit during lunch. And the idea for me was always and continues to be like, well, I can't, I'm not gonna waste my time. So I'm only gonna keep this thing on for maximum 5 hours essentially a day. Now, if I did lunch too, it would be more like 7 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But I only keep it on 5 hours, and that's literally the only way that I am able to keep any kind of semblance of a minimum wage. And for the record, like I also used to do Caviar, but then as Jake said, they merged in with DoorDash, and I was not about that. And now I do Uber Eats stuff, and I would say I make 15-ish to 20-ish an hour, but that's before taxes. And also, New York City is just a weird. New York City is strange because it's propped up on the fact that there are a lot of externalities that wouldn't necessarily exist in other cities. Like you're not having like the billionaire son of a telecom mogul ordering McDonald's at midnight. Like and the weird upper class like supporting these things. It's there's just not as many people in smaller cities like
Right.
Austin or Portland or Denver or what have you.
Have you guys done any gigging in other cities? Either of you or anyone?
I had an idea for a while that 'cause there's like a level. It's a Faustian deal when you sign up for this type of work, right? You give up all sorts of things by not being an employee, but they really sell you really hard on like freedom, make your own schedule, all that crap, right? So
Mhm.
for me, that was what was appealing about it, and I always try to get as much of that back. And one sort of grand idea I had ultimately at one point was, what if you could tour all the time and do this work everywhere you go?
Right.
Because you could just work whenever you wanted, and that'd be a great way to work while having a show every night or whatever, right? And I looked into it, and for a while you could do this only on Lyft. You could get certified to be a Lyft driver like nationally, so you could drive to a city, do Lyft rides, and then do your show, and then drive to the next city or whatever. But they just stopped. Something legally happened that caused that to not be a thing. I think it got broken up, or maybe, and then after a while, it's just no. You're only certified in one fucking city, so like you fuck off, like you can't,
So every app company confines you to working in one specific city or state.
It's weird, man. They change it in strange ways. Like in New York, they'll kind of keep you in the tri-state area. Generally speaking, if you turn on the Uber app, they'll be like, "Do you want to be in Suffolk? Do you want to pick up McDonald's in Suffolk County? Or like, would you like to go to Weehawken?" And you're like, "No, I don't want to do that." But other places, I'm sure it's. I mean, I feel like it's probably in the Bay Area. They might have an option for like doing stuff in North Bay, South Bay. But like, yeah, it really depends. It's wildly dependent.
Interesting. So yeah, I mean, in California there's just a huge number of gig workers, and it is an incredibly hot topic right now. What is going on? I mean, Silicon Valley obviously is in California, but also some of the biggest cities in America are in California with huge, a lot of these gig workers. Majority of them are, minorities, low income folks, people just kind of doing it on the side, single moms and things like that. And obviously beautiful, sexy comedians, of course, trying to make it in the LA scene, I'm sure. But what has been happening is there's been a lot of attempts to try to make these workers classified as employees because, I mean, I learned two new things from speaking to you guys now. One, it is explicitly told that you are not supposed to be working two different companies at the same time, which I'd never heard before. And two, most companies require that you work within one region or municipality. Both of those things make me think that you guys were employees and getting ripped off.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in addition to those things, you guys don't get things like health insurance or Cobra. I mean, not every job has health insurance, but that's certainly something that's not really an option for anyone who's gigging.
Well, actually, we get this really weird thing at Uber Eats. Actually, caviar. I have no, we didn't. I think it was no. Actually, Jake, I don't know if you remember this. Did you get it? Did you get that email at one point where they're like, "Yeah, if you get fucking struck
At
by
the
a
beginning of
vehicle."
COVID.
It was something. Well, it was another one too, where like I think in 2018 or 2019, they were like, if you get struck by a vehicle, congrats, there'll be some sort of coverage, and that was because somebody in Philadelphia was doing caviar or something, got struck by a vehicle, and then like they died, and then they got sued, and then they were like, okay, now we have to basically offer some form of catastrophic sort of
Yeah.
health insurance. There was that situation, and then at the beginning of coronavirus, they were like, oh, if you get coronavirus and you give us a test, and you get a test, and you show it to us, we'll do something.
It was like razor thin, and it was like you could tell they were doing the bare minimum, but they had to address coronavirus in some way, because especially at the beginning, before we really knew how coronavirus was transmitted, it kind of seemed like delivering food was going to be an incredibly dangerous job. And now we know
Right.
that it doesn't
Yes.
really transmit outside, so it's actually probably not. But like, those companies were in a really weird situation where they were like, they can't stop functioning, and also you're not a fucking employee, so they can't really, or they won't do anything where they give you some sort of compensation or anything. So
Right.
they made my favorite thing about that time was that they sent this weird message out that was like, if you can prove you have coronavirus, we'll give you $50 or something weird like that.
Yeah.
Second thing was
It's like March 18th, and no one has ever been tested for coronavirus ever, and they're just like, we'll give you 20% off your next Uber Eats delivery. Like,
yeah, and it was like, prove you got it while working or something crazy like that. They would be able to do.
We'll
The
give
other
you
thing that was
preference while you during surges.
Yeah,
You'll get
Yeah.
you'll get the choicest clients.
The other
great.
thing that was really funny to me was that the app itself is all gamified and stuff, and it's sort of pings you every now and then and says like, it's Halloween, good spooky night, but also people are really hungry.
That's right. I got that one.
It has like a holiday themed, like, it's the Super Bowl. Why don't you score the touchdown of earnings or something? And then like, after
Yes.
coronavirus happened, I remember the phone was silent for like a while, and then there was just this ping I got one day that was just like, yeah, for no particular reason, people are really hungry right now. Very dodging the point that what it was trying to say was that like, we need people to deliver food during a pandemic.
The only thing worse than a boss who thinks he's cool is a boss who thinks he's a video game.
Yeah. They really like when Corona started, the mask came off, so to speak. And
Nice.
interestingly enough, you kind of got to see their sort of wealth that they at least pretend to sort of accumulate, because I remember Jake, you and I sort of had a very brief conversation where I was like, "Hey man, you gonna do this?" And you're like, "Nah, I think I think I can't." And then I was just sort of like, "All right, into the breach." And then like I started doing caviar again, because my messenger job, the hours got greatly cut because of it, and I started doing it. And some of the fares that you were getting were being like, you deliver like a small bag of something, not inconvenient or anything like that, for like $15, like 6
Yep.
blocks,
Were you making mad money at the beginning? Because I mean, I remember thinking like, Danny's gonna die. Like, this is crazy.
Yeah. I know. I was out in the world, touching every doorknob, like riding every elevator, pushing every button, and just being like,
Danny would just come on the podcast and being like, I had the entirety of Fifth Avenue to myself today, and it was glorious.
Yeah, I wouldn't let Danny near, like, I'd only meet him on the street during those first couple months, because I was worried that he was just like sponging up coronavirus with every Uber Eats delivery.
Yeah,
And part of me is like a little jealous of you, because I had like roommates and stuff that we sort of had to talk about it and go, if you cannot do this, maybe don't do it. That's kind of where I landed. But if the money was good, that sounds cool, and B, like, having survived it, looking back on that must have been like surreal to bike around New York with fucking empty.
Yeah, it was really strange, just going down like Broadway and being like, "Where is everyone?" But here, the weird technical aspect of it, which was strange, was they were like, all right, we'll give you all these bonuses. So that was like Caviar's main thing is they would be like, if you do three extra deliveries, you'll get like, we'll give you like a $3 bonus or a $5 bonus. That's really where a lot of the money came from. Whereas instead of it being like,
Right.
we'll give you $3 or $5 extra, it turned into like, we'll give you $17 extra. So,
Wow.
but the problem with that, and this is where it did get quite desperate at times, is like, you get tired doing this kind of stuff, especially if you're not using a motorized bicycle or an e-bike or what have you. And the restaurant schedule was like wildly in flux. So things that were open normally weren't. They were closing earlier than they were supposed to. And then it would be so disheartening if you had done like 11 deliveries and it's like 9:55 and you're like, please let another delivery come in. Please let another delivery come in. Because if that one doesn't come in, that one more to make it 12, which is a division of 3, then you don't get the 17 extra.
What?
Right.
For that last 3, it would be like a situation. Yeah, you don't get the
Oh.
every 3 deliveries you'd get that like $15 extra, and it would be
You had-
time
Yeah,
bracketed.
you had to hit a certain number by a certain time, and it would often be like you would be looking at the app going, they're fucking doing this on purpose, right? They're like someone in the office is assigned to me and is being told to don't give them the extra $50 because that's a fucking price point or something, or sometimes you would get it. I don't know. I did right before I quit. One of the last months I did was I worked January of this year, and I had decided that I needed to just stack some cash and like get a lot of exercise and stuff that month. And I just did nothing but work, and I made the monthly bonus, which I can't remember how much
Oh,
it was, but
God.
if you do like
Yeah.
over the whole month, you make like $1,000 or some shit. And it came right down to the last 15 minutes of the last month of the or last night of the month.
That's
I was
insane.
fucking losing my mind. Like, yeah, I was going up this huge hill, and I was just like,
Oh
fuck
my
you,
God.
fuck you, fuck you. And then I got
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
They really give you that
Over
Glengarry
and
Glen Ross panic attack where you're like, am I going to make it? Like,
Yeah.
am I going to get coffee this month? Am I a closer?
I spoke to one Postmates driver in Los Angeles for the story that we're going to get to, that should be coming out this week for the markup. And this guy, he didn't want to give his name, but he was a Postmates driver, and he said, if you do 90 deliveries between Thursday to Sunday, you are guaranteed $400, and that's kind of his threshold, and that's what he goes for. But 90 deliveries, like for you guys, is that a feasible amount of deliveries to do?
No.
in 3 days?
No. You have to be Let me put it this way, David. When I was doing Caviar, it would be, and I was like, bam, 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 bam. Everything was going perfectly, running on all cylinders. Critically, the restaurants aren't fucking up. They're not messing up their orders and taking super long.
Right.
I would maximum be able to do like 3-ish an hour, maybe.
Wow.
Like, so maybe 4. I remember one time there was like, I did like 15 orders in like 4 hours, maybe
Wow.
5 hours, something
Yeah.
like that. But it was one of those things where it was Friday night in Manhattan, and I was just like, pinging back between, around the below 14th Street, and like everything was working. And again, the restaurants can really fucking suck. Like, God help you if you have to pick up from Chick-fil-A. Like, God help you. It is, and then just like the
God
food
may
can
help
be-
you. I mean, they have God on their side for sure.
True, yeah.
Christ is on your side. But yeah, like and like, yeah, like the restaurants will totally fuck things up. And they, I think it varies wildly, but like they a lot of times will have a large disdain for their independent contractor, people that they're dealing with, because they don't work for those restaurants. So they're just sort of like,
Right.
yeah, put that shit on the back burner. We'll make it when they get here, you know?
So that's kind of the thing is when you don't work for somebody, they don't treat you right ultimately. And not, I'm
Yes.
not saying that because you are an employee, you are treated well, but there is at least some sense of a duty and an obligation and legal protections for employees. And so Prop 22. So what happened was in 2018 in California, the California Supreme Court in this decision called Dynamex decided that um, independent contractors in these gig jobs are employees. Then that was challenged again, and then that was under a specific set of circumstances. So the California State Legislature passed something called AB 5, and they passed AB 5, I think, last year. And what it would do is it created a test by which it's called the ABC test, by which someone would be classified as an employee instead of an independent contractor. And that came into effect in May. Instantly, basically, what it would have done is it carved out, is it would have said all these gig economy workers who, if you were in California, you are an employee, which means you are entitled to core rights of employees. You're entitled to overtime pay, minimum wage, workers' comp, discrimination protection, the
Mhm.
right to form a union, and any other, and all sorts of other things that come with being classified as an employee. One of them in California we'll get to. In California, you cannot be coerced as an employee into making political speech, and we'll get to that in a second. So
Oh.
after AB 5 passed, the gig economy companies, so Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Postmates is now owned by Uber, and uh, I'm missing one more.
Uber, Lyft,
Uber, Lyft,
DoorDash.
DoorDash, Instacart. Uh, mo-
Scott.
yeah, those ones are the big ones. They decided to get a voter referendum on November to basically carve out an exception for AB 5 to say if you get if you are an independent contractor and your work comes through an app, okay? So literally they are saying that within the law, phones are different. That's the thing. They're saying if you get independent contract work through your phone, through an app, you are exempt from AB 5 and from being an employee. I mean, just pause for a second and think about how ludicrous that is and how easily any employer can say, well, no, I hired you through the app at, um,
Mhm.
anywhere, like at any, random company. Therefore, you're actually an independent contractor. It's kind of a ludicrous standard. So they passed this, and the voter referendum's is coming on November 3rd, and the campaign is something that I wanted to talk about because it's been one of the most insane things I've ever seen in politics, just in my entire life. I've never heard of employees being coerced by private corporations as intensely as I have with the gig economy or people individually being reached out to. I mean, because of tech is in our phones, it is a part of our lives in so many ways. They have so much information on us. They can electioneer in such novel ways. So to start off with it, let's look at what's going on with the gig workers themselves. Gig workers
Sure.
have been essentially coerced or incentivized into making political speech. And that is illegal under California law and not illegal. I don't know if it's illegal in New York, but it certainly is in California. And there was an Uber driver, numerous Uber drivers have reported that whenever you would log on to the Uber app, it would ask you if you support Prop 22. And you could say, yes, I support Prop 22, or just okay. And then you couldn't say no on it, basically. And it would ask you that every single time you logged on and logged off of the app. Some Uber drivers reported that they would get it every single time they got a new customer because, like Jake, like what you were saying, is they switch back and forth between apps all the
Right.
time. So every
Mhm.
single time they they get a new customer, they're asked whether they support Prop 22 or not. And the only way that it would go away is if you say, yes, I support Prop 22. And then once they do that, that message shows up on your customer's phone that says your driver supports Prop 22. Learn more about
Oh God.
why voting yes on 22 is important. And so this is definitely something that, like, I spoke to one Uber driver in the San Francisco area who wanted to speak, wouldn't want to give his name. He was worried about retaliation, kind of like Jake, like what you were saying. Is like he was worried about the apps stalking him, seeing his name being in this article, and then just not giving him rides anymore, or giving him shitty rides, or not giving him these bonuses that these people are working for all the time. So he wouldn't give his name, but he said that he was just worried that if he said yes, then they would like him more. So he said yes, and then they would give him better rides. But he has no way of proving or disproving that. And then afterwards, about a month later, he stopped getting the notifications after he said yes, but customers would see that he said he was supporting it. Then about a month later, it came up again, and it still happened. He would still get, do you support Prop 22 or not? And then finally, after it got reported that Uber was doing this practice in a couple of different publications, KQED was one of them, they stopped doing this seemingly. They said that that he looked at it again in the same place where it would have been. It said, "Thank you for making your voice heard. Our survey has closed. Now it's up to us to take action." I mean, have you ever seen a survey where you either say yes on 22 or okay, got it, are the two options that you could,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very goofy how they do it, and California, it should be noted, is very interesting when it comes to this stuff. Like New York, almost, I don't know if you feel this way, Jake, but like New York almost feels like its own little microcosm for the apps because there's such demand here that they almost have to play by the rules of capitalism that they purvey to be like, oh, this is something, that you can do. So you kind of get affected by it less here. But out there, California's so big. I mean, isn't it like the fifth biggest economy in the world or something like that? That it's the rules are just it feels different. It's literally bigger, physically
Mhm.
too.
You know what this kind of reminds me of? So the nature of independent contract work is not new. A lot of what you're seeing in the gig economy has parallels earlier in like trucking.
Mhm.
The the people that run the trucking companies have sort of figured out ways to push off a lot of responsibility for like maintaining vehicles and stuff like that onto the truckers because they're technically independent contractors, not employees. And yet that, status does not come with any of the freedom from being an employee, which is a, thing that plays out in certain ways. They do that to you in this work. And they also, the second thing you're describing here with this coercion and this sort of thing where you're trying to convey to the consumer that the Uber driver really likes Prop 22 is something you see in the service industry. Every once in a while there'll be like what's it called, a astroturfed campaign, like a fake
Mhm.
thing that's supposed to appear to be grassroots. There'll be like a Save Our Tips campaign, and that always looks very
Oh
similar.
yeah.
Like, oh, Uber drivers like being independent contractors thing. It's kind of the same argument, right? So if you're trying to convince a bunch of people that Uber drivers don't want to be employees and they prefer to have the freedom or whatever of not being an employee, it's kind of similar to this tip thing where, I fucking know a lot of bartenders that if you ask them flat out, would you rather get a paycheck like they do in the UK or just get tipped, they'll tell you they like the tips because you're able to sort of rake in a certain amount of money if you have the good shifts and you're like a diehard like lifer in
Right.
the service industry. But ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, it would be a way better industry if you were able to unionize and just raise your wages and stuff like that and not be paid out in this really archaic way where, you're legally only paid like a couple bucks an hour. And then
Right.
businesses would just have to be set up better.
Right.
Um,
And it's
Yeah.
not that like the bartenders can still unionize because they're called employees, but they just have, bad wages and get a lot of tips. Like a gig worker, there is no legal requirement that if you are an employee that you can no longer have flexibility to drive when you want. Like the one of the things that I've heard from a lot of gig drivers, I like reached out to some people on these like Reddit or these subreddits about that if you're like an Uber driver subreddit or whatever, and yeah, some of them I could verify that they were people, some of them I couldn't. They would just kind of talk about how they like the flexibility, and that's why they want to vote yes.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no requirement that they would do that. Just the companies would just have to change their operations, and maybe as a result of that, they would reduce flexibility. But the company could just fiddle the numbers around and make it work for people, so they could still have the flexibility. That's not on the law to reduce flexibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're trying to make it out like this is something that these workers really enjoy about the nature of the job that like wouldn't exist if they were legally protected employees, which isn't
Right.
true. And also, another thing that they bring up a lot in both these cases is like, well, the reason that people like this specific nature of this type of work is because it's part-time work, and this is the type of thing that people do while they're doing something else. But that's like such a flat out lie when you just look at the economy and like
Right.
look at what everyone has to work these shitty jobs, and no job should be a goddamn like a half a job like these things are describing,
So,
and they're like, oh, it's
I-
good for college kids or whatever. What do you mean? Because you don't want to pay them?
Right.
I think about like the first time someone does drugs, if they have a good experience, they'll end up trying to chase that dragon for the rest of their lives. So like you have like, and why I'm saying that is the gig economy, they like dangle this carrot in front of you that says, hey, look, you can make $400 this weekend during surge pricing, or check it out, there's a bonus if you sign up right now. And in this, that feels like, also, when I was a waiter, there'd be these mythical stories of somebody dropping like a $400 tip,
Right.
and you're like, hell yeah, look at how much money I can make if I grind. But there's a finite number of hours in the day. And like what Danny brought up earlier, there's a finite number of deliveries that you can make, even under the most optimal circumstances. So even though there's all this like in quote unquote freedom, we're still constrained by the number of hours in the day, and still constrained by the fact that people are only ordering Big Macs between 7 p.m. and 9:30. So if you're not working during that rush, you're not making that money.
Totally. And also like there's more people who do gig work part-time, like under 20 hours a week, maybe even under 10, than people who do it full-time, 30 hours a week or more. But the actual number of the work that's getting done, the number of deliveries or rides that's getting done, that is done more so by the full-time employees, who are in the minority, than the majority of quote unquote, gig workers who are only doing it for less period of time. So one thing that I've heard from a lot of in a lot of campaigns for Yes on 22 has been, well, the majority of workers support the flexibility. They want to vote yes on 22, but the majority of workers aren't doing if the people who support yes on Prop 22 are the people who are only working 10 hours a week. And again, there is nothing stopping someone from being a part-time employee. Like, just because you have employee status doesn't all of a sudden mean that you're going to be required to work 40 hours a week. You can still work 10 hours a week as one of these drivers. But if they support it, then those people aren't actually doing the majority of the work. The people who are doing the majority of the work for these gig jobs are treating it like a full-time job.
Yeah, there's like crazy that false equivalency is totally there, because like one of the apps that I tried to sign up for was Grubhub at a point in time, because I heard it was a good one, and I couldn't. You just couldn't. Like their whole thing was like, yeah, sign up for this, you could do work for us, and they were like, no, the New York market is saturated. You cannot work for Grubhub right now. So like they had already self-policed themselves and said, no, this is cut off. So the idea that they're like, oh, we're gonna have to kick people off of the platform or whatever. It's one of those things where it's like, well, you let them.
You're already treating these people like employees.
Yeah, yeah,
They just said they're
exactly.
not hiring you. So it's like that's the same thing as a job rejecting you.
Yeah, another thing that they do on the apps is that they if they need to hire somebody for a particular company, they'll give you like a referral bonus if you can get someone signed up that week, but they're only for certain limited periods of time. And then there are other times where, like Danny's saying, they're like, no, there's too many people on here. And I think a lot of that had to do with these bonus contracts that they would shuffle around and buy off of each other. So for a while when I was working for one company, Caviar, they had really good bonuses where every 3 orders you got an extra fucking $5 or something like that, right? And then it went away. And I asked somebody about it one time. And they said, oh, what happened is that Grubhub or fucking Uber or whatever bought that, like the right to do that bonus, and that they're in competition with each other over those bonuses, which they use then to like incentivize workers. And so there's just this constant like sloshing around of even like the worker pool, because they know that everyone is working for everyone else.
Right.
And the whole thing ultimately to me really is kind of heartbreaking, because there is like a way of doing this that could be really convenient for everyone involved, if not for the profit motive gumming everything up and causing the person that owns the company to then want to skim all this surplus labor off of all the people that are working.
Right.
In a fair world where there is not that profit motive, this could be a really convenient way for people to get exercise, get food, and make, maybe a little extra money or whatever. And everyone involved could probably be benefiting from like the what do you call it?
Jake, yeah. I think of a New Deal type nationalized Uber Eats, where your community service that you feel, you're like, well, I've got some hours to kill. I'd love to walk some people's dogs, or I've got some hours to kill. I'm gonna deliver food to this old folks' home.
I mean, there's ideas of like utopian communism that are essentially you work fucking 4 hours a week and you do some shit where you pick up trash or something. This could be like part of that sort of life pretty easily, because Silicon Valley is so frustrating, because they are dreaming up ways in which what is the fucking word I'm looking for? Not ingenuity, but the big fucking
innovative.
Innovation
Yes.
cuts a lot of this stuff that in theory could lead to to just an easier life, but it's
right.
It will never not be like this if we have capitalism intact, and especially in its current form, though.
So
That's
now
right.
it's so back yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, so back to the campaign itself. There's a couple other reports. I want to just highlight these because they're kind of crazy. So one Instacart location was reported. This was from Eater San Francisco, or no, CNN Business reported this one. Was that they were having Instacart shoppers put in a survey or like in a bulletin saying what, like the merits of Prop 22 in the bag in their customer's bag, and then shoppers or the customers, when they would receive it, they would get a survey that says, did you receive yes on 22 bulletins or no? And
sick. I love it. This
So
is some Pavlov dog stuff, man, where it's like enough routine. They're just getting used to, acclimated to the idea that Prop 22 is good, right? Through the consistent political speech that the apps are imposing on them through their phones. And all of our phones are now a mailbox, right? That where we get the corporate messages delivered to us, spoon-fed to us. Right. So it's like the right to, it's like the slogan, the right to work sounds great, but then you realize that it's like a crazy libertarian idea.
Yeah.
Well, I can see how, like, it's someone who maybe has never worked in the gig economy, or somebody who just doesn't have the experience of even just being a low wage worker or whatever, might look at all of this when they're on an Uber ride and think, oh, all the Uber drivers are organizing to, get this word out about Prop 22, not realizing that it comes from above.
Yes. So they stopped doing that after they got caught, basically. And then DoorDash was also reportedly offering restaurants free yes on 22 bags for DoorDash workers. So if you were a DoorDash worker, you wanted a free new swag bag. that says yes on 22. They were giving that out to people as well. I mean,
It's
yeah.
also it's worth noting here that like a large portion of this exploitation and what you're describing, David, is basically the exploitation of people who are not only just customers who use DoorDash or Uber and taking advantage of what they think is happening, but like the workers in the sense where they literally don't know what's happening. And I mean that like in the sense where like they potentially speak English as a second language,
Right.
or they are just sort of like, look, I have to feed my family, and the way that I do that is I ride this e-bike around and I do this for like 9 hours a day. Like those I
Right.
mean like I can't tell you how many times I've run into these situations, in New York where like I will where it's just like I'm working adjacent to people where it's just sort of like they go 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 go, and just their sheer force of will is what's driving them, and like they very easily could and just be carrying like one of those bags. This is yes on 22, and like
No
they don't know
idea.
what it is. They have
No
they have
idea.
no fucking clue.
Yeah.
Because Danny, I know you ride a bicycle like me. Did you know those e-bikes that everyone uses in New York to do this type of work weren't legal until like a couple months ago?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, there those that's another weird precarious thing too, where they're just like, you tired of riding, you tired of pedaling, just get a great e-bike. And
It's
they
illegal.
yeah, they're
Wait, wait. I'm
those,
sorry. The companies, they would offer an e-bike for sale.
No, they would suggest
no.
you get one, which
Are you
is not the industry standard tool for doing this type of work in New York was illegal the entire time we were doing it. They legalized it a couple months ago, I think, just because like, everyone needed to do this shit to make the economy work in COVID in New York.
That's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah,
Yeah,
now
right.
keep in mind, Jake and I do it with a regular like mechanical bicycle, but it should be noted
Law-abiding
that like
citizens.
but that like I'm very tired at the end of the day. Like I sleep a lot because of this. And furthermore, I have to eat a lot of food
Yeah.
because when I ride, I mean like I think minimum I ride at least 200 miles. Oh, like cuz I'll do like 60s on Thursdays and Friday. And then every time I turn on the Uber app, I usually go about 30. So it's like, yeah, I ride like 200 miles. So it's like what Jake is saying, where it's like, if you plan on doing this as a full-time thing, you basically have to have an e-bike, and they were less than legal. You could have a pedal assist e-bike, which is where when you pedal, then the motor
Right.
turns on. But then New York said, "Oh, you can it's illegal to have one where there's a throttle, like on the handlebar specifically. You can't have one of those throttle ones." And then if you've been in New York for any string of time, you'll just see those guys. I call they do like the horseback move where
Yeah.
they just like they
Right,
just
side
sit.
saddle.
Yeah, they'll just sit
Oh, I
on
like that. Yeah.
the bike seat with their legs out, or sometimes they'll dangle a leg. A lot of the guys in New York like to dangle just one. They dangle one leg, and of course they just got that throttle going. There's no pedaling. You'll see the e-bikes, which
I'm
is the
amazed they
most
could do that bareback.
Yeah, they just do they have the rustiest chains that haven't moved a single rotation in a year.
Well, I was gonna say my favorite thing that happens with those guys is you'll be biking like in the bike lane, and then you'll like get a guy riding side saddle on a e-bike like that, like it's a couch, and he'll just be like, and he'll
Yeah.
be like, hey buddy, hey, so who you working for, Caviar or something? And
Yeah,
you
yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, I'd say actually it's Caviar, but sometimes I do Uber. And then like sometimes it would happen to me, it would be kind of annoying, so I would like speed up, but then he would speed up, and I'd be like, okay, I'm slowing down, and then he would slow down, and he would use the e-bike to constantly be like, it was like he was in the car next to me. He would just be having a conversation with me. Like, fucking Christ, dude.
Yeah, the illegality of that stuff is like a constant. It was basically just like how big of pieces of shit are the NYPD willing to be this day?
So the people, like the drivers, were the ones who were going to get punished for it, not the companies. Just
Oh,
wanna
exactly.
Oh yeah, oh
Yeah,
yeah.
okay,
You
okay,
take
so-
on all that. Yeah,
Right,
you
right.
know?
So I want to go back. I want to go back to the idea of laundering support, like corporate support, through like vulnerable people.
Mhm.
So a lot of these California residents have been receiving, like the customers themselves are receiving messages on top of all the crazy stuff that they're getting from the workers and saying that they support it. The Yes on 22 campaign just randomly was texting people. Here's a message. It's like a message from a black woman saying, "Hi, I'm Alicia, a single mom and rideshare driver, urging you to vote yes on Prop 22. By 4-1, drivers want to remain independent and overwhelmingly support Prop 22. Yes on 22 also provides us new benefits. Without 22, access to this flexible work is in danger. Please vote yes on 22." So the new benefits that they're talking about are gas mileage reimbursement that is actually below the federal legal reimbursement level. Beforehand, they were literally just not reimbursing them in the same, like, as much. But like, I can't remember exactly how much it is per mile, but the IRS has like a certain number. It's like 57 cents. But they're doing it like, oh, these new benefits, we're going to make it 30 cents now. And with these new benefits, you're going to get $300 a month towards healthcare. I mean, none of this stuff is what you would get as an employee, but they're calling it
No.
new benefits. So yeah, they're just like laundering it through these people, through the customers. They're also just harassing the shit out of customers, which is really crazy.
Yeah, this reminds me of the social dilemma, because the customers are not only customers, but they're also products for an ideology.
Yep.
They're the fact that these companies now can harvest the emails and phone numbers of all of the people that use the product makes for like the most powerful mailing list that you could have.
Absolutely. And they can legally do that because they just put it in their privacy policy. We reserve the right to contact you for...
Like this was how the Reagan and the New Right sort of took power in the late 70s and early 80s, was that all of the ultra right-wing guys just bought Barry Goldwater's mailing list. And then they started buying mailing lists for people that, like things like gun control. So like if you liked guns, then Republicans would just buy your name and be like, well, they're already a customer for this product. Let's see if we can get them involved with like evangelical bullshit or limiting access to abortions.
Yeah, they were even sending... Absolutely. I mean, it's similar playbook, but just with new technology. I mean, they were sending banner alerts on people's phones. Uber was, and so did DoorDash, to people in California, that even if their Uber app wasn't open or the DoorDash wasn't open, I have confirmation from a few people that they still received a banner alert, like it was an Amber Alert, telling them to vote yes on 22.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
You're like, dear God, has another girl been snatched up off the streets by an In-N-Out? No.
No, it's your freedom. One person from San Francisco, this is where I first found out about these tactics, was Uber was sending out messages to customers saying, if Prop 22 fails to pass, riders and drivers will be affected. And you either could say confirm and nothing else. There's no other option. You just had to confirm that Prop 22 was good before you could access your app. You had to basically sign what could have been, and we don't have evidence for this, but could have been used as a quote unquote survey that they support, that you support Prop 22. And then you can
send that to a senator or something and be like, look at this. We've got 100,000 confirms for this.
Right.
Yeah, it's weird because I remember now the only reason there isn't just this absolute and complete inoculation of people is the fact that like we already get so many notifications that a lot of this stuff is just like water off the duck's back, in some ways, So I mean, luckily most people are just sort of like, what? It's gone. They don't even think about it. But it does get used, like you said, for those, for purposes that they don't even know about, where they get surveyed and it gets sent to somebody else. So like, even if it's not affecting them, their thoughts or their opinions are being, turned into a product.
Right.
Yeah, or it just resurfaces on the news. That you individually getting the notification doesn't really affect much, but then later on, when you're watching some bullshit on the news, you see like, oh, everyone in California supports this fucking thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's misleading statistic.
I'm just
Absolutely.
thinking about like those man on the street interviews they do for local news where they're like, "Excuse me, sir, would you like to participate in an interview for King 5?" And I'm in Seattle right now, and they interview you for like 2 minutes, and then later on at 7 p.m. It just shows like local fool looks at accident and laughs, and they cut out 2 seconds where it just says like, "Wow, look at that," and then it makes you like, "No, it makes me look like an asshole." That's not what I said. That's not what I said at all.
Yeah. And now that companies are doing this is and then they're sending those survey results to people and then they're like, "Oh yeah, that was kind of a confusing message I received on my app. Oh, but it looks like everyone supports it, so I may as well vote yes." And the astroturfing and the Pavlovian response I think I mean that's that you guys hit the nail on the head earlier with how that's forcing customers into thinking that this is something that's supportive. Polling came out recently on it. I think it says that it is now Prop 22 is still supported by 46% of those surveyed, and 42% oppose it, with 12% still undecided. I think is what the poll was. So it is still possible for this to fail. There's still a lot of 12. The fact that it's a week away and there are 12% of the people who don't haven't made up their minds yet. Huge ground to cover on this sort of stuff. The
A lot of
companies have
Ken Boons.
yeah, the companies have spent $200 million on this. So between DoorDash, Instacart, Lyft, and Uber, $200 million on a voter referendum. More money than any voter referendum initiative ever in U.S. history, or in California history at least. And this is the fact that it's this close after that much money is being spent. And in the opposition to 22, they're spending like 16, 17 million. Labor unions just coughing up whatever money they can, just like random donors putting whatever money they can into supporting the No initiative. But this is something that they're throwing a lot of money at because this affects their ability to continue to exploit these folks, and people are still skeptical of it. It can still fail. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys, for listeners out there, I think all of us are against Prop 22. In case you haven't, in case that isn't clear, I think all of us would encourage you, if you live in California, if you vote in California, more so than the presidential election, voting no on Prop 22 is incredibly important.
Yeah, and it is again worth noting, California, the number one most populous state in the United States, second in land mass, and you're going to have you're going to have millions of people voting on this one specific thing that like it's so funny how you're going to have people in Oakland voting on the same thing that affects people in San Diego, that affects the same
Right.
people who live in like right below Medford, Oregon, and like the very tippy top of California being affected by like Lake Tahoe. They're all doing this one thing that like kind of mostly primarily affects the city centers, It's
And if you're
it,
just
it-
a normal Dem, just like for what it's worth, moderates even oppose like Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have presumably said they do not support Prop 22. Okay, so this is not even like a Bernie issue. This is like even normal Democrats oppose Prop 22. So for all the K Hive listeners out there, you know what to do.
Sure.
yeah, you know
And
who
I
to
think
abuse.
what Danny advocated for earlier implicitly is that we should break up the state of California and turn it into 3 or 4 states.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And I would also say too, every time you see a commercial for like Uber Eats or formerly Caviar or whatever, just know that the work is not it's not easy. Like they're just like, just pick up this you could just do this as a side gig. Like a couple months ago, I fucking delivered like 4 32-ounce sodas, like, and on a bicycle. And I'm not proud to say this, but like those sodas, they fucking fell over, bro. Like they did not make they did not make it all the way where they needed to go. So
Yeah.
I they got put in the bag. I tried to stack them up as much as possible. It was like a Carl's Jr. situation. So there was also like a bacon king burger or something like that going on.
I'm too hungry now, man. I'm too hungry. I'm gonna go order from Uber Eats right after this.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, it's like the Overton window has shifted on what delivery is. I talked about this with my friend Carrie in the 90s. I think it was only pizza and Chinese food. Like that's what got delivered. But now, the whole concept of delivery has shifted where they're just sort of like, yeah, dude, I don't know why you can't deliver a watermelon that's been cut in half that has spears of like maraschino cherries and fruit coming out of it, which I delivered the other day.
I'm waiting for you to show up to my place with a styrofoam cooler filled with 24 raw oysters.
Yeah, or like sparklers. Just like,
does anybody else still call in pizza delivery because it just feels right? No, okay, that's just me. All right, I still, I just, I just don't. Sometimes I'm like ordering a pizza. I'm like, oh well, I'm just gonna. There's something about it that still makes me want to call pizza, but still order on Seamless everything else.
I know a lot of people who pride themselves on like they call the restaurant because they want like the worker at the restaurant to get a job instead of like it going through an app which fucks someone over via gig economy shit. But I think what they don't realize is that a lot of times those two things just end up going to the same person, and also not paying gig economy workers isn't really like your individual buyer power isn't really how we solve this problem, you know?
Right.
Mm-hmm. There's no such thing as an ethical consumer under capitalism.
There you
go. Field goal.
Also,
one last thought. Jimmy Fallon doesn't tip. Everybody remember that. Jimmy Fallon does not tip.
He's Mr. Pink from Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah.
At the comedy table, he's the one who's like, I don't tip.
Matilda girl doesn't tip either. That lady.
Which one?
Gun Girl?
No, the actress who played Matilda, Mara something.
No. Mara Wilson.
Mara Wilson. Yes. She's got those the bangs. She's got the bangs. Yeah.
But
you gotta tip, otherwise people will tell people.
Yeah.
You gotta.
All right, Jake. Anything you want to plug before we sign off?
Yeah, order pizza if you live in New York. I might show up. Who knows? I'm famous for being a pizza guy online, and I'm not actually a pizza guy anymore. But yeah, my podcasts are Pod Damn America and Why You Mad, and I don't know. I'm at Feral Jokes on all the social media. So follow me on Twitter and stuff and catch a Zoom show or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's it.
Gabe, when's your next Zoom show?
Tomorrow night, every Wednesday night, Funhouse Comedy at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Zoom. And the Instagram account for that is Funhouse Comedy.
You can follow me. You can follow me in the streets. You will probably see me trying to approach a feral cat and just be like, I'd like to pet you. Come on, let's be friends. That's where you'll see me, probably right by the Jefferson stop.
Good plug.
Perfect. Yeah, good plug, dude. And I look out for my story on the markup. Hopefully, it should be coming out this week on this sort of stuff. And vote no on 22 California residents. That's it for Ponzi Scream. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.